Christmas Eve. It's going to be up to you how merry a Christmas you have.
What do you want? Today, I absolutely
We won't
can't.
talk about that till later. This is something else. You do have a moment to spare us.
Oh, yes, of course I do, except...
Good. I was sitting over at Olson's restaurant when I saw your husband go down the street.
Yes.
With a lady.
Yes, so?
If you'll pardon my asking, wasn't that lady a Mrs. Lind?
Yes.
Just now come into town?
Yes, today.
She's a good friend of yours?
Yes, she is. I don't know what...
I also knew her once.
I'm aware of that.
Oh, you know all about it. I thought so. Well, then let me ask you short and sweet. Is Mrs. Lind getting a job in the bank?
What makes you think you can cross-examine me, Mr. Krogstad? You? One of my husband's employees? But, since you ask, you might as well know. Yes, Mrs. Lind is going to be getting a job on at the bank. And I'm the one who spoke for her, Mr. Krogstad. Now you know.
So I guess right.
One does have a tiny bit of influence, I should hope. Just because I'm a woman, don't think that it means that when one has a subordinate position, Mr. Krogstad, one ought to be careful about pushing somebody who
Who has influence?
That's right.
Mrs. Helmer, would you be good enough to use your influence on my behalf?
What do you mean?
Would you please make sure that I keep my subordinate position in the bank?
What does that mean? Who's thinking of taking away your position?
Oh, don't play the innocent with me. I'm quite aware that your friend would hardly relish the chance of running into me again.
But I promise you.
Yes, to the point. There's still time. And I'm advising you to use your influence to prevent it.
But I have absolutely no influence.
You haven't? I thought you were just saying
You
this.
shouldn't take me so literally, How can you expect I have any such influence over my husband?
Oh, I've known your husband since our student days. I don't think the great bank manager is any more steadfast than any other married man.
You speak insolently about my husband, and I'll show you the door.
The lady has spirit.
I'm not afraid of you any longer. After New Year's, I'll soon be done with the whole business.
Now listen to me, Mrs. Helmer. If necessary, I'll fight for my little job in the bank, as if it were life itself.
Yes, so it seems.
It's not just a matter of income, that's the least of it. It's something else. All right, look, this is the thing. You know, just like all the others, of course, that once a good many years ago, I did something rather rash.
I've heard rumors to that effect.
The case never got to the court. But all the same, every door was shut in my face from then on. So I took up those various activities you know about. I had to grab hold somewhere, and I dare say I haven't been among the worst. But I want to drop all that now. My boys are growing up. For their sakes, I'll have to win back as much respect as possible here in town. That job in the bank was like the first rung of my ladder. And now your husband wants to kick me right back down in the mud again.
But for heaven's sakes, Mr. Krogstad, I have absolutely no power to help you.
That's because you haven't the will to. But I have the means to make you.
You certainly won't tell my husband I owe you money.
What if I told him that?
That would be shameful of you. This secret, my joy and my pride, that you should tell him in this crude and disgusting way, he should learn it from you. You would expose me to the most horrible unpleasantness.
Only unpleasantness?
But go on and try. It'll turn out the worse for you, because then my husband will really see what a crook you are, and then you'll never be able to hold a job again.
I asked if it was just domestic unpleasantness you were afraid of.
If my husband finds out, then of course he'll pay what I owe at once, and then we'll be through with you for good.
Listen, Mrs. Helmer, you've either got a very bad memory, or else no head at all for business. I better put you a little more in touch with the facts.
What do you mean?
When your husband was sick, you came to me for a loan of 4,800 crowns.
Where else could I go?
I promised to get you that sum.
And you got it?
I promised to get you that sum on certain conditions. You were so involved in your husband's illness, and so eager to finance your trip, that I guess you forgot to think out all the details. It might just be a good idea to remind you. I promised you the money on the strength of a note I drew up.
And that I signed?
Right. But at the bottom I added some lines for your father to guarantee the loan. He was supposed to sign down there.
Supposed to. He
date blank. In other words, your father would have had to date his signature himself. Do you remember that?
Yes, I think he...
Then I gave you the note for you to mail to your father. Isn't that so?
Yes.
And naturally, you mailed it at once, because only some 5-6 days later, you brought the note properly signed, and the money was yours.
Well then, I've made my payments regularly, haven't I?
More or less. But, getting back to the point, your father was very ill then, I believe.
He was near the end.
He died soon after?
Yes.
Tell me, Mrs. Helmer, do you recall the date of your father's death? The day of the month, I mean?
Papa died the 29th of September.
That's quite right. I've already looked into that. And now, we come to something curious, which I simply cannot comprehend.
Curious thing,
This is the curious thing. Your father co-signed the note 3 days after his death.
How? I don't understand how he...
Your father died the 29th of September. But look, here your father dated his signature October 2nd. Isn't that curious, Mrs. Helmer? Can you explain it to me? It's also remarkable that the words October 2nd and the year aren't written in your father's hand, but rather in one that I think I know. Well, it's easy to understand. Your father forgot perhaps to date his signature, and someone or other added it a bit sloppily before anyone knew of his death. There's nothing wrong in that. It all comes down to his signature. And there's no question about that, Mrs. Helmer. Your father did sign his own name, didn't he?